Hey there, everybody, Paler here, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at a game called Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. If you happen to live under a rock and you haven't seen this is the latest iteration in the Metal Gear franchise, which has spanned nearly 30 years. It started back in 1987, really took off around 1998 with the first Metal Gear Solid game, and this is the fifth numbered iteration. There's actually about a total of 11 games in the franchise. This is kind of a return to the PC. Metal Gear Solid and Metal Gear Solid 2 had been on PC, and then there was about a 10-year period where we didn't see any of them until 2013, where we did get a port of Rising Revengeance, which is a bit of an outlier. Rising Revengeance was a dumb name, but beyond that, it was an action spectacle fighter. Think more along the lines of Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, where the main games are stealth military third-person shooters. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see these back. It's also interesting because leading up to this game's launch, there was a lot of unknowns. Konami is basically shutting down their video game side. Well, they're moving away from traditional big AAA video games. They're going to be focusing on mobile games and on their pachinko machines, whatever the hell they are. And this might literally be the last Metal Gear game we ever see. They also separated ways with Hideo Kojima Studios, which have been the main driving force behind the Metal Gear games. This was his baby. Kojima was really the guy responsible for all of these games, and it's his vision we get to see. So even if they do make more of these games, this is going to be probably the last one of this breed, the Kojima type games. I know myself personally, having not had the Metal Gear games on PC for so long, and the fact that everything was coming around with Konami pulling out of the industry, I was worried that we were going to be looking at a rushed PC port that was probably going to be broken, possibly even incomplete. Well, I'm happy to report that that seems to not be the case at all. So at time of recording this, I have a little over 32, almost 33 hours in. I've basically finished 25% of the game. And so far, I've had no port issues or anything like that. The port is capped at 60 FPS. The FPS seems to be tied in with the physics logic. If you uncap it and start going above 60, things get real wonky. Not a major problem for me. If it would have run at 120, that'd be great, but I'm not going to complain. 60 is perfectly good. In fact, 60 is great for me, as long as we're not sitting at 45. And it does run stable at 60 FPS for me. I have it set at just under high settings on my 770 Ti, and it is a rather graphically impressive game. You're not going to be running this on a light system. You're going to need something with a decent GPU, probably a 650 Ti or better, something with 2 gigs of RAM, to really see what it is. It's something you're not going to be putting this on a work laptop. And then, but it is relatively well optimized. It is stable running once you're dialed in with your graphic settings. It just runs along great. No problems on that side. I will say that the game does seem to be designed from the ground up with controller in mind. The basic movement, combat, running around, aiming and shooting works just great with keyboard and mouse, but you do spend a decent number of time jumping in and out of your menus to select either sending companions out on missions or radio communications, changing radio and all of that, and that all is handled much easier with the controller. Once I went over to the controller, I just found it to be more comfortable and stuck with it the rest of the way. I did play about the first 3 or 4 hours with the keyboard and mouse, and it didn't really gain anything. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, Paler, I'm a PC gamer. I didn't get to play the earlier games. What can I expect in Metal Gear Solid 5? And that's a bit of a difficult question to answer, as Metal Gear has, over the last 30 years, kind of evolved and integrated a whole bunch of weird elements together. It did this somewhat gradually at first, and then kind of really after Metal Gear 3 went off the deep end in some areas. Not in a bad way, just in a... hear me out. So, on the surface, Metal Gear Solid games are third-person, tactical espionage games. It's combat style similar to Splinter Cell, if you've seen those. In fact, Splinter Cell pretty much stole a lot of the combat elements from Metal Gear to create its own game. And so that's the basics of what you're going to be seeing for the most part. You're going to be trying to engage enemies one or two at a time. You're going to be trying to take them out stealthily so they can't alert anybody in real quick succession. You're going to be sneaking through bases, trying not to be noticed, avoiding line of sight, and all of that. That's the surface level. It gets a little weirder, though, as the game, the franchise has become very well known for these crazy, over-the-top, almost comic book style villains. Not just villains, but enemies also. Boss fights. You have, and not within this game, but looking back at the previous ones, you have things like cybernetic ninjas. You have vampires that basically can't be killed. You have a guy that can basically read your controller inputs and has psionic powers that you have to fight. There's a cowboy that's just kind of crazy shot and everything. Snipers with the ability to completely go invisible in a wolf pack to fight alongside them. Just these really weird, crazy boss designs that would fit right in with X-Men or something. And it's a little strange going from this semi-realistic, wannabe realistic, serious game of stealth action and then having these villains. Underneath the whole thing is a very convoluted story, basically about the Illuminati, a master control that's trying to run everything. There's also elements of social and economical and world critique in there. There's parts of this that you can see where Kojima's trying to make a statement on soldiers for hire, private militaries, kid soldiers. There's some elements of that. I would almost point to the most recent South Park episodes, the last season of it, where you saw them create an episode about like the Redskins. And while obviously on the surface there were fart jokes, underneath there was some honest, what is going on with this name and all that. There's some of that tied in with Metal Gear, just not about the Redskins, but about more soldiers in war zones and all that stuff. Then there's one other element that may or may not be seen by everybody. I notice it, and that is the Japanese element. The Japanese, in my opinion, generally wear their emotions on their sleeves. There's no subtlety to a lot of their storytelling, and when I see it, it's just a little out of place. It doesn't bother me, but it's funny to see that. So you have this somewhat realistic, gritty stealth shooter with superhero bosses, with an Illuminati story element running underneath all the games, the social and political questioning of Kojima, and then these strange Japanese elements all tied together in this weird, crazy amalgam of a game. Now, the important part, though, is somehow, despite all these strange elements, they come together to create a game that works and is genuinely fun to play. There's not much more of a recommendation I can give. In my 32 hours, almost 33 hours, I've been having fun for 31 and a half of them. There have been a few small down points, but for the most part, the game has just been a blast to play all the way through. Very enjoyable. Metal Gear Solid 5 does do a bit to depart from the standard formula, that linear, story-driven game with bosses every 45 minutes to an hour and a half. For returning people returning to the series that are looking for that, they might be a little disappointed. But what Metal Gear Solid 5 does is it turns everything into an open world. Not a sandbox, but an open world. There's several moderately large environments, and you can load between them. You can choose to go to this one or that one, and then you have to go to a load screen for that. But once you're there within that environment, you can go anywhere within it as you would wish. And they're rather well populated and everything. And this adds quite a bit to the gameplay, but it does break up the narrative a bit. In the 30 plus hours I've played, I've only actually seen 4 bosses, and one of them was a repeat boss. So I've seen 3 different bosses, had 4 boss fights, I guess I should say. And the story's been present. It's strong compared to some games. Compared to many games, it's actually strong. But for a Metal Gear game, the story is actually sort of light. So there will be those people that go into this, and they're going to be disappointed by that. Now, in my opinion, what it gains in terms of combat, in terms of gameplay, far outweigh the negatives of losing that focus. We don't really have any other open world stealth game. We have open world and sandbox games where stealth is an option, but we don't have a whole bunch. We don't have any that I can think of that are built from the ground up around this element. And because of that, it's a very unique and enjoyable game on its own right. It's not going to be for everybody, but if you're somebody that likes a little bit more of a patient game, a slowly approaching a game in a slow manner, you're going to probably find something here that you quite like. Also a game that gives you a lot of different options. Now the game has basically two different parts. There's the part where you're out in the world doing your missions and doing what you need to, and then there's like a micromanagement subpart. So, very minor spoiler here, but you find this out in the first 2 hours of the game. Like, you are in charge of creating your own little private military force. You're trying to fight a war, let's just say. And in order to do this, you're building a base. And the base is going to be built on these oil platforms that aren't actually drilling for oil, they're just platforms for people to live on. So you start off with one platform, and you can have maybe like 35 soldiers. And some of those soldiers are going to do some research for you. Some of those soldiers are going to be out in the field scouting for opportunities for you in the field. Others are going to be just doing other little errands and stuff. Once you get enough money and enough materials, you can then build another platform. And now you can have more soldiers. And then you can research higher level things. And then you can build another platform and you research even higher level things. So you're expanding out this base that you're building. A lot of this is done via a menu system, which is adequate. It gets the job done. Now, Kojima did do something very smart here, as they went a little bit further. Rather than just have it be a menu you can look at or something you can see a picture of, you can actually take a helicopter and fly to this base. And it's a 3D rendered, completely open complex of oil refineries, oil rigs, that you can run around on. There's not a huge amount of things you can do there, but you can run into the soldiers that you have working for you. You can find some small hidden items here or there, and you can just mess around. There's also some key elements of the plot point that play out here. They use this to tell some of the story. It's your home base. And where it could have just been a nothing, it's an actual location you can go to, and that's pretty nice. There's also some weird things. There's another base, or another oil platform you get, for the only reason of capturing animals and creating a zoo. I talked about some of the crazy themes that they put together in this. Well, this is another one. You're a super soldier snake, and you're capturing bears and pigs and goats to put in a zoo. Why? I don't know why. Because someone said so. There's also a multiplayer element tied into this. Not your main base in the single player, but you can create a separate base on the online servers, where you can invade somebody else's base and steal their resources, or they can invade yours and steal your resources. I haven't been able to play it. The servers have not worked. 2 weeks later, the servers are still down more than they're up. Within 10 minutes of being on, you get kicked off. It's whatever. It's something I'm not worried about. I'm going to focus on the single player. And that single player, oh boy, that single player, it's fun, and man, is there a lot to do. The best way to really describe it is opportunities. What kind of trouble can you get into? Many of the missions are basically just go to this area and find either the prisoner or find the skilled soldier and either kill or extract them, or go to this location and destroy certain equipment and everything. And then they give you all these tools, or you unlock the tools via the research we talked about, that give you an abundant number of options to do it. You can go with probably the pro level of trying to sneak through, never being seen, don't kill a single person, just do what you got to do and get out unnoticed. Or you could probably, and I kind of misled people a little bit here earlier, I said you're not going to win a firefight. Well, that's not entirely true. Especially later on, once you get some of the better weapons, you can straight up fight these guys. It's not the most elegant approach, but you can just go in guns a-blazing and sometimes come out alive. If they call in a tank on you, you still might die, but you can. Me personally, I like to start off and do a little bit of mix of both. I start off the beginning of a level very stealthily, I sneak in, and most bases have radio equipment. And the radio equipment's how they contact the outside world and call for reinforcements. So I'll sneak through and I'll plant C4 on all this radio equipment. Once the equipment's all ready to blow, I'll then destroy it. Now all of a sudden they have no communications, and it's just me and whoever's left in this base that I didn't kill while sneaking through or knock out while sneaking through, and then I can duke it out with them. So I get to enjoy both the stealth element and the crazy combat element all tied together in one. It works. It really works, and it's a lot of fun. You also get to give a shout out to the extraction balloon. I believe they're called fulcrums for like the pivot point on something. The extraction balloons are unbelievably enjoyable. There's something just so silly about, like, if you tranquilize a goat and then put the balloon on it, everything seems to kind of wake up a little bit when they're just hovering there in the air before the balloon extracts them, and they're always and then off they go. There's something just so enjoyable about doing that. 30 hours in, it hasn't gotten old. It may eventually, but it's fun. And some of the things, like the ability when you find a vehicle that's sitting parked with two guys sitting in it talking, and you sneak up behind them and you extract them and the Jeep together at once and get all three of them back to your base, it's pure enjoyment. And that's really the strongest recommendation I can give. I don't know how well the story is going to carry through. I've heard that the story ending is a bit disappointing, and I can see that coming. You know, the story does not seem to be front and center here, which is a bit strange for a Metal Gear Solid game. Though, for us on PC, where we've not been able to experience all the Metal Gear games, we've only seen 2 of them, that might not be a bad deal, you know? We're not going to be probably as invested in it as, like, the people playing it on PlayStation. I will go and say a little bit. There is a standalone prequel demo, proof of concept, called Metal Gear Ground Zeroes. So this was the demo for the game that they released a little over a year ago, and it was basically to show how the open world combat was going to work and make sure people understood what they were going to be getting. And some of the elements in that do lead directly into the first few moments of the game. Basically, at the beginning of the game, the very opening scene, you wake up in a hospital. Ground Zero explains why you're waking up in that hospital. Ground Zeroes alone is roughly 2 to 8 hours in length, depending on how much you want to do. If you want to really dive into it, you can probably get 6, 7, 8 hours out of it. Most people are going to be done in about 3 hours. If it's reasonably priced, you can get it for sub $10. It is worth picking up just for that filler into the story. And it also allows you to import a few things into the main game. Beyond that, though, I think the game does so far stand well enough on its own that you don't need to have played any of the previous Metal Gear games to enjoy. But if you're looking for a game that just allows you to have fun in a sandbox, not a sandbox, an open world, well, sandbox, whatever, with stealth mechanics, I think we're looking at a real winner here. It's a shame that this is probably the last Metal Gear we're going to get, and they're never going to really evolve beyond what we have here. But hopefully somebody else will pick up the idea and see the potential for something great, and maybe we'll get a bit more out of it. But for now, though, we have a game that's going to have a lot of content, probably 120 to 140 hours to finish, of just great slow burn. I'm not going to rush through it. There's only so many mission types. I'm going to play it for 5 or 6 hours a week over the next 2 months. And I think when I'm finally done, I'm going to really be glad I played it. And it'll basically carry me right up till Fallout 4. So there you have it. That's my take on it. So far, very positive, very enjoyable. If you've played it, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd also ask that if you've enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please give a thumbs up. Until next time, though, this has been Paller. Thanks for watching.